Over on Jaguar 8, a new college football video is out. In this video, we talk about the bizarre drama in 1977 between the University of Texas football team and the Marriott Hotel. Click the card in the upper right corner to watch. And now, on with our feature presentation. September 6, 1981. It's opening day of a brand new NFL season, and we've got an interconference battle on our hands over at Anaheim Stadium between the Houston Oilers and the Los Angeles Rams. On paper, this might be the best game of the opening slate. At the very least, it's the best of the late slate. So much so that on NBC, you've got the #1 crew of Dick Enberg and Merlin Olsen on the call, so you know it's going to be a good one. There's so much to talk about regarding this game, from the fact that both teams were playoff teams the year before, to the fact that this is the head coaching debut for Ed Biles after he controversially replaced Bum Phillips, despite the fact that Phillips guided the Oilers to 3 straight playoff appearances, to the fact that we get to see Earl Campbell, the reigning leader in rushing yards and rushing touchdowns, and the reigning offensive player of the year, start another season. Seriously, the storylines of this game going into it are bountiful, and then some. And there's a reason that this was one of the most anticipated games of the opening slate. And in the end, the game lived up to the hype and then some. Because if you remember this game, in all likelihood, you remember it for one of the greatest debuts of all time. With the score tied at 20 apiece in a back-and-forth affair, and just 1 minute left in regulation, this man right here, Willie Tullis, would break the deadlock in just about the most dramatic way possible. This was Tullis' first ever game. He was an 8th round pick out of Troy who was expected to do absolutely nothing. But he was brought in to field this kickoff, and sure enough, 95 yards later, the Oilers were victorious, stunning the Rams by a final score of 27-20. This was the first touchdown that Tullis scored in his career, and turned out to be the only touchdown that he would ever score in his 8-year career, making him a member of the One Touchdown Club. And man, if you're going to only score once in your career, this is quite the way to do it. Of the very exclusive club of players to score in their debut game, and then never again, my guess is that Willie Tullis is the king of that clubhouse, because it's awfully tough to top this. But while there was a ton of drama on the field, and while this kickoff return touchdown left the 63,198 fans at Anaheim Stadium stunned, there was just as much drama off the field with regards to the highly controversial broadcast of the game. Because let's just say that there's a reason that many more people were able to watch this game at home. The good news was that the entire Los Angeles area could watch this absolute classic of a game, even if the end result wasn't quite what they had in mind. The bad news was that the broadcast was done in just about the most incompetent and most mindless way possible, and I do not say that lightly. Because have you ever wondered what would happen if Michael Scott from The Office was in charge of NBC? Yeah, I'm not exaggerating. That's exactly what happened here with this broadcast. It's an incident that needs to be seen to be believed. Because this is the story behind what might just be the stupidest moment involving NBC during the 1981 NFL season, and one of the dumbest NFL-related broadcasting moments, and that's saying a lot, in the history of the Peacock. Before I talk about what NBC decided to do for this game that bordered on absolute hilarity, we need some context to understand how the broadcasting rules worked back then, and in particular, how blackouts worked. Back in 1981, the blackout rule was relatively simple. For a game to be mandated to be shown on television, it had to be sold out. Every single seat had to be filled. If there wasn't a sellout within 72 hours of kickoff, then the game would be blacked out, unable to be shown within a 75-mile radius of the home team's stadium. In other words, if this game wasn't sold out in time, then all of Los Angeles and Anaheim and the surrounding areas would not be able to watch the game. Now, there were some exceptions where the home team's owner could lift the blackout, but rarely, if ever, did they do that, because they wanted butts in the seats, and if the game was on television, it meant there would be more no-shows, meaning less money in revenue from parking and concessions and merchandise and whatnot. So the Rams had their work cut out for them trying to sell out Anaheim Stadium, especially since even though the Rams made it to the Super Bowl in 1979 and were forced to be reckoned with for the entire 70s, they still had a few games get blacked out in 1980. Now the bad news for the Rams and their fans was that as the 72-hour deadline was approaching, there were still some unsold seats. It wasn't a ton, but let's face it, Anaheim Stadium was horribly built for football. It was a baseball stadium first and foremost, and there were some seats that were tough to sell simply because the sight lines from them were terrible. There were some multi-purpose stadiums done right, and then there's the awkward Barclays Center-esque look where they try to retroactively configure one sport into another sport's configuration, and it looks terrible, and is not a pleasant experience for some fans. And that's what Anaheim Stadium was. It got to a point where CBS, later in the season, asked the Rams straight up whether those tickets would count toward future blackouts, sensing that it was unfair to count those tickets that are obstructed, a la the controversy at Veterans Stadium from the 70s, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. The good news, though, was that there weren't a ton of tickets left, which meant that, in a perfectly legal move, it was feasible for a company to come in and buy the remaining tickets to ensure that the game can be shown on TV. And for NBC, seeing as there were roughly 1,248 tickets left, which eventually dropped to around 900, they decided to do this. They wanted to be able to air the game in Los Angeles, and were willing to shell out some extra money to buy the remaining seats to do this. There were a few reasons for this. Number one, NBC didn't get the chance to televise a ton of Rams games that year. Remember, the network broadcasting the game, especially back in 1981 when cross-flexing between networks did not exist, was determined by who the road team was. So anytime an NFC team was on the road, it was CBS broadcasting the game, not NBC. In fact, NBC only had the rights to 2 games for the Rams that year, this one against the Oilers and one in Week 5 against the Cleveland Browns. So they only had 2 chances to truly capitalize on the Los Angeles market, and they didn't want to squander it. Number 2, they had to buy the tickets at face value, which comes out to $13,000. That's a drop in the bucket for a major company like NBC, so they could absolutely afford to do it without breaking the bank. And number 3, yes, you take the small financial hit up front, but it not only means you generate good PR, but it means that more people will watch NBC at that 4 o'clock Eastern window, since the local team is playing, and the ratings are always higher when the local team is involved. More eyeballs mean higher ratings, which means more money you can make for advertisements. And with that, NBC officially announced that the game was sold out, as they were buying the remaining tickets. As one NBC spokesman said, "It's what everybody wanted. Now they'll get to see the game." It was an obvious win for NBC. This game was going to be a better draw in Los Angeles than the alternative, which was Broncos-Raiders, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And if our story ended there, then let's be honest. This isn't much of a story now, is it? A company buys up the remaining tickets for the game to ensure that the game can be seen on TV. Yeah, I've heard that one hundreds of times before. We saw that with the discount store and the Cowboys, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. We saw that with the Vikings and Burger King, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. It's a frequent occurrence. There's nothing unique or special about this. However, that's where you'd be wrong. Because you see, and this is what I mean when I say imagine that Michael Scott ran NBC during this time period, NBC announced that the game was sold out. They never actually bought the tickets. Seriously. In other words, the scene played out like this. "I declare a sellout!" Hey, NBC? I just wanted you to know that you can't just say that a game's a sellout and expect anything to happen.
I didn't say it, I declared it.
I swear, I'm not making any of this up. NBC declared that the game was sold out, and that they were going to televise the game, without actually buying the remaining tickets. In an actual sentence that feels absolutely insane to type out, NBC announced it was guaranteeing a sellout. That's all. NBC hadn't bought anything. It was an empty promise. You see, this NBC station had never done this before for the Rams. Anytime the Rams played a game on NBC before this, the game was either sold out by the deadline, and this was a non-issue, or the game wasn't sold out, and NBC just decided to let the blackout happen and show something else. This meant that this was the first time they had ever done something like this. And somehow, despite the blackout rule being around for nearly a decade, and despite having the blueprint for what to do from other affiliates and companies doing the same thing, this station had no idea what it was doing. The blackout rule said that NBC had to buy the tickets 72 hours before. And NBC thought that as long as the game was sold out by kickoff, that it could be televised, which, let's be honest, doesn't make any sense at all. Because you're telling me it's 12:59 and you have no idea what game is going to be shown in the area at 1 o'clock? How does that work? Were you living under a rock for every Rams game before this? Did you not know any of this? How? Naturally, when NBC announced this, the Rams were highly confused, seeing as they had tickets remaining. As General Manager Don Klosterman said, someone from NBC called and left a message with my secretary. The message said NBC was going to buy all our remaining tickets. I told Don Nims, our ticket manager, to hold the tickets. However, no one knew who made the call. The Rams called up NBC, both a national station in New York and the local Los Angeles affiliate, and made several calls trying to figure out the mystery and what the heck was going on. And no one answered or said who made the call. So NBC announced a sellout because they were going to buy the remaining tickets. But when contacted, no one knew what they were talking about. That led Nims to now frantically call NBC until he got an answer, saying, "Hey, look guys, we have about 1,200 tickets that you ordered that are just sitting here and haven't been sold yet because no one's come down to pick them up. What are you doing? Are we holding these tickets? Is this game sold out or not?" And when Nims made this call, NBC was surprised. It hit them at that moment that, oh crap, we actually have to buy the tickets and have someone pick them up. We can't just announce a sellout to circumvent the blackout rules without doing anything. Whoops. At that moment, finally, someone came down from the NBC office in Los Angeles to Anaheim Stadium to pick up the remaining tickets, ensuring that the game was now actually sold out and could be seen locally. As a spokesman for NBC said after talking on the phone, "I guess we better send a messenger over to pick them up." Gee, you think? That's kind of important. This is like the Seinfeld rental car scene, but in reverse and the exact opposite. You know how to hold the tickets, you just don't know how to take the tickets. And that's really the most important part, the taking. It's truly amazing how many of NBC's own shows accurately describe their incompetency at this very moment. Still, crisis averted, even if it was by the skin of NBC's teeth. So let this be a lesson to anyone in life, whether you're just an average Joe, or whether you're a major corporation like NBC. If you place an order for something, make sure you pick up the order. If you call a bakery and ask for a cake for someone's birthday, and then hang up the phone and say, "I declare that we have cake," that doesn't mean you actually have cake. You still have to go and pick up the cake. I can't just declare that this video has 1 million views. I can't just declare that I make $10 million a year. I have to actually, do it. Like, this really should be common sense. But because some of these broadcasting stories are just ridiculous, I'm not even surprised anymore by anything. Because on the opening week of the 1981 season, the only thing worse than the Rams' kickoff coverage on special teams was NBC's absolute failure when it came to understanding NFL policies that had been in place for years, and to exhibit any common sense whatsoever. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.